Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week, I continue my series on the species of Spelljammer by talking about the Neogi. The Neogi are quite possibly one of the most unpleasant species to deal with in all of Dungeons & Dragons. And, well, let's get into talking about them, shall we? So sit back, relax, and enjoy as I start talking about quite possibly the most evil race in all of Dungeons & Dragons. From a world-building perspective, let me just say, I will always find the Neogi to have been a missed opportunity. The overall appearance of a Neogi is, take a moray eel, stick its head coming out of the face area of a giant wolf spider. And that's a Neogi. They are hideous, they are scary looking. And they are quite possibly one of, if not the, most evil race in Dungeons & Dragons. Why do I say this? Now, yes, I know some people are pointing to the various devils and demons and such. Some are pointing to the Illithid and the Pirates of Gith, who I'll be talking about later. Some might even be pointing to the Beholders as things that are more evil than a Neogi. No, I don't think so. You see, each of those other races, their evil is for some other purpose. For the Neogi, well, let's start off with this. Neogi are obligate carnivores. What does this mean? Well, this coincides with there being slavers. If you're lucky, you'll get sold to someone else. If you're unlucky, you're on the menu. And that's where we start off with the Neogi. Because, because of how they are, they don't actually see other sentients as, well, people. They see them as property. Neogi are, as I mentioned, slavers. Every Neogi has at least one Umbrah Hulk that they keep enslaved to do all those physical things that the Neogi really can't do. Lift heavy things, engage in massive violence against other people, that sort of thing. A Neogi ship is mostly run by slaves. Slaves that the Neogi have mind-controlled, because that's among their abilities. And then, the Neogi will do whatever it takes to get more slaves. Now, this is important for two reasons. One, it keeps them in food. Two, it keeps their ships going. Oh, yes, You see, other races have helms that rely on a mage or cleric sitting at it, controlling it, and all that. And it pulls that energy, all their spells for the day, from them to power the helm, to power the ship. Well, Neogi don't do that. Nope. What Neogi do is they grab a handful of slaves, throw them into what looks like a glass cell, slam the door, lock it, and those people within have their life force sucked out of them to power the spelljamming ship. Yes, that's right. The Neogi were the first race to use the so-called Death Helm. And, yeah, it's as nasty a helm as it sounds. The Neogi basically powered their ships off the life force of their slaves. Now, Neogi society is based around hierarchy. And what will happen is Neogi do this whole thing where whoever's the wealthiest ends up sort of being the one in charge. But eventually, a Neogi gets old, gets senile. So, what's going to happen then? Well, all the Neogi's fellow Neogi get together and use a concoction of special poisons that cause this elder Neogi to bloat. And he will bloat and swell and eventually crack open. And more Neogi will be spawned, fully formed from his remains. Those that survive, because they start off killing each other, and then maybe some of the parents will kill those that are too annoying or not quite strong enough. Either way, you do this and you don't get maybe more than a dozen new Neogi that grow to adulthood. But the worst thing about the Neogi is they don't see anything wrong with any of this. In fact, it's quite acceptable for a Neogi to decide that another Neogi is a rival and that he can take him, to go through the process of turning his rival against his will, against his plans, into a great old master. And spawning the next generation of Neogi. And remember, all Neogi have at least one Umbrah Hulk as a personal servant. So what that means is, if you are fighting a Neogi ship, there might be only about 4 Neogi on board. But there's going to be at least 4 Umbrah Hulks on board. And Umbrah Hulks are big, nasty mother humpers. they're basically living tanks because they're built to burrow through stone, and they have a thick armored carapace because they hunt the things that live deep underground normally. And Neogi keep those as slaves. In addition to their other lesser sentient species, at least from Neogi's eyes, as slaves. And the Neogi society, as I mentioned, is based around accumulated wealth. Let's take a moment. If anyone is familiar with Star Trek Deep Space Nine, if you think of how vicious and backstabbing the Ferengi were, Neogi are worse. Because, well, Neogi can eat their rivals. But that is the gist of Neogi. Now, they have a number of small ships, but in essence, all the Neogi ships are some sort of spider theme. The Mind Spider is their most common ship. It's a small, light ship powered by a minor death helm and a small crew. And then they have their warship, the Death Spider. It is easily a match for an elven armada, because they even have their counter to the flitter in the Leech, which is a small ship that a couple dock with the Death Spider. But yeah, the Neogi are, in essence, the Neogi were intended as the big bads of Spelljammer. They were intended as the villains you run into throughout space. Now, why do I say from a world-building perspective they were a missed opportunity? Well, simply put, you had a race that looks absolutely evil. They could have made them good. They could have done some other race as a slaver race. Or they could have made the Neogi a more divided society. But they didn't. The Neogi society, because of how it works, because a lot of the memories are kind of imprinted on the young Neogi early on, it ended up being, honestly, I don't think many of the demons or devils in the lower planes are quite as evil as Neogi. But that's just my opinion on this. Yours might differ. But next week, I'm going to talk about one of the species that is radically different from its groundling version and its spelljamming version. Next week, I talk about the Beholders. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.